Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. It's Tori, and today I am here to give you guys my version of the Nightclub book tag designed by my good friend Brian over at Belltube, which you can find in the description box below, a link to his channel. Go check him out. Now, I have heard some people say recently that we're, as a community, maybe a little bit sad that tags aren't in vogue anymore, and so I figured, you know what? Why not? Brian made a really cool new tag, and I think it's really fun, and I wanted to take a stab at it. So here is my version of the Nightclub book tag. Let's go. The first one is Cocktail Hour. Name a book that you think pairs perfectly with your favorite drink. Now, my current favorite drink is a plain and simple, tried and true Moscow Mule. I've tried several variations on it, and I love all of them, and that is my comfort drink. I love it so much. And when I was thinking about this, the way I would describe my favorite drink is it's got a little bit of that sharp tang to it. It's got a little bit of that citrus flavor with the lime. It's got a little bit of that warm undertone with the ginger beer. The book that I chose to pair with it is Jade City by Fonda Lee. This is the first book in her Greenbone saga, and I read it last year and absolutely loved it. And the hint of lime is really where this came in, because in this series there is a magic system based on jade, and certain people who wear jade have magical enhanced abilities, and it fits so seamlessly into the undercurrent of the city and the economics and the society of everything. It's brilliantly woven in. It also has a very sharp flavor as a story. There's a lot of grit to it, but it also has a comfortable character undertone that pulls you in and emotionally invests you. And I couldn't think of a book that paired better with my Moscow Mule than Jade City. Number 2 is Neon Lights. Name a book with a cover that immediately grabbed my attention and dazzled me. There were so many answers to this question on my shelf. Like, fantasy has some of the best book covers in the entire industry of publishing. The one that I immediately pulled off the shelf was Sons of Darkness by Gaurav Mohanty. This is kind of described as inspired by Indian mythology, Game of Thrones, and I am so excited to read this book. I cannot wait. Let's just have a moment for this cover. I love the way the typography is seamlessly integrated with the design of the book. It has that gold foil that draws your eye. It's very shiny and exciting, and also this giant wolf motif at the top. I just absolutely love this cover. I love dark covers. I love the kind of visceral nature of this cover that jumps out at you immediately when you see it. And yeah, this was an easy pick for me, but I gotta say, there are so many great covers to choose from that it was really hard to pick just one. Number 3 is The Bouncer. What book did you have to put down because it just wasn't letting you in? Now, this one, I actually went with a trilogy because it was the one that sprang to mind immediately, and if you've been watching my channel recently, you will probably not be surprised by the one that I'm going to mention. I actually DNF'd The Live Ship Traders by Robin Hobb after reading Ship of Magic, which is the first book in the trilogy. And man, like, that was one of the most shocking reads I think I've had on Booktube so far, because I went into that trilogy fully anticipating that I was going to love it. I was so sure I was going to love it. And yet when I got into book 1, the emotional burnout that I had with these characters and the plotline just was so incredibly full of just the worst. Like, the worst things over and over and over and over, and it just felt ridiculous after a point. And no one was more surprised than me when I put the book down and was like, you know what? This story really isn't letting me in, and I am really upset, and I can't wait for it to be over. And I don't want to read anymore. I'm honestly still shocked, and I'm not entirely sure what happened, but here we are, and that is the nature of subjective reading, I guess. Next up is DJ's Choice. What book would I recommend for someone who is brand new to the genre of fantasy? This is a question that we talk about on Booktube all the time, because we are constantly recommending books to people, and we are constantly welcoming new readers into the genre, or readers back to the genre after being away for a while. And it's such a welcoming community and there's so many great places to start in this genre that you really can't go wrong. But one that I actually thought of while I was thinking about which book to hold up for this question surprised me a little bit, because oftentimes you'll hear the tried and true, oh, start with The Wheel of Time, or start with Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson, or start with A Game of Thrones because it's been on TV and a lot of people are at least aware somewhat of the storyline. You know, there's a lot of those kind of tried and true recommendations, but the one that struck me right away as one that I personally have recently loved and I think would be a fantastic entry point for anyone into the genre is Song of the Beast by Carol Berg. This is the story of a broken bard character named Aidan McAllister who's been in prison for a really, really long time, and he still doesn't understand why. He doesn't know why he went from the grand heights of being one of the most revered artisans in the entire country to being thrown into a small jail cell and tortured for 17 years. And when he is released from prison, he is still pursued by people who want to do him harm, and he is determined to find out why this is happening and why his magic has been stripped away from him. It is an incredibly emotionally harrowing experience, but in a very quiet way. I think Carol Berg does an amazing job building in a protagonist who is very much unlike any fantasy protagonist that I have read before. I really, really loved Aidan. He's a fantastic twist on the typical fantasy protagonist, because after all of this time, he's not driven by revenge. And that's something that's really beautiful about Aidan. And he, I think, kind of drove me to consider how I would respond in a situation like this. And he encouraged me as a reader to aspire to be better, despite all of the things that happen in life that are hard. And the dragon magic in this book is such a fresh twist. I love it so much. I really, really loved this book. And it's a super easy, shorter standalone, so anyone who's not used to reading the big, long, chunky books can get a little bit of a taste test with Song of the Beast by Carol Berg. Next one is Disco Ball, and that is name a book that made you feel like you were part of a vibrant and glittering world. And the first one that popped into my head was an easy one, The Lies of Locke Lamora by Scott Lynch. This book I read years ago and absolutely loved it. It became a very quick favorite in my collection. And one of the things that I feel like we don't talk enough about when it comes to this series is the world building that Scott Lynch does. It's incredible. Yes, we love the characters. We love Locke and Jean and all of the other characters in this book. But let's be real, the dialogue, the world building, the writing, the prose, like all of it is so good. And the world is so fresh and unique and interesting. And I just loved it. So obviously, if you haven't read The Lies of Locke Lamora yet, please do, because it's one of my absolute favorites. The world building will not let you down. It is incredible. It is vibrant, lived in, gritty. It feels so real, and I love that about it. The next one is Dance Floor Diva, a book that had me dancing with excitement from the first page until the last. And this one was one of my favorite indie fantasy reads in the last few years, and honestly, when I started it, I was from the first line. That first line immediately told me, this is going to be a good book. And I wasn't disappointed. And I absolutely loved the entire ride from the first page all the way to the last. And it still remains one of those books that surprised the heck out of me in terms of how good it was. And what a debut, honestly. That is The Wickwire Watch by Jacqueline Hagan. This is equal parts Gaslamp, epic, mystery, throw a little bit of horror in there. We have a magic system that is based on emotions and spirituality, and it is incredible. And you've got a main character who is based essentially on The Artful Dodger from Charles Dickens' Oliver Twist. And this is just, do yourself a favor and read the Riverfall Chronicles. The fourth book in the series just came out this week, The Sundering Hours. It's so good, you guys. If you haven't picked up the Riverfall Chronicles by Jacqueline Hagan yet, please put it on your TBR because it is still one of my favorite ongoing series. I am so excited to get my copy of the fourth book this week and start reading. So please go ahead and pick this up if you haven't already, because just that first line, let me read to you guys the first line of this book because it's just such a chef's kiss opening. I really love it. Had Mr. Bash known this was the night he was going to die, he would have stayed at home. I mean, that's all. That's all I'm gonna say. Go read it, enjoy it, have a good time. Number 7 is guest list. Which author would you invite to a book-themed exclusive party and why? The answer to this was pretty easy because this is an author that I think would fit in incredibly well with my group of friends in terms of personality and interests, and I think he's just a pretty down-to-earth guy. He would be great fun to talk to. We could, you know, have a calm, low-key discussion about books and history and writing and characters and all of the fun things and have a really good time doing it. And that is Pierce Brown, the author of the Red Rising saga. Pierce, I've had the opportunity to hear him speak. I went to a Q&A and book signing of his last year, and just he's such an interesting person to listen to, and I think we could have some fantastic conversation. Number 8 is VIP Entrance, and this is a book that I feel privileged to have read before it was widely popular. And going along with my last answer, for the last question, I'm going to go with Red Rising by Pierce Brown, because this is a book that has been such a foundational story to my channel here on Booktube, to me as a reader. I read this only a year or two after it came out and was just immediately hooked. I love this trilogy so much, like so much. It's one of my favorite book series of all time. And the characters just have stayed with me and become such a foundational part of who I am as a reader and even who I am as a writer to some degree. I love them. I love them so much. And I definitely was a huge fan of this book before it had its big boom here on Booktube, and it's been really, really fun to see so many people reading it, falling in love with it, talking about the characters and all of those things, and I will continue to love this series for the rest of my life. Every time, you guys, the train goes through every time I sit down to film. Every time. The next one is Dance Battle. Which 2 characters from different books would you love to see in a face-off dance battle? This one was really hard because I'm trying to imagine most of these characters in a dance battle, and at the end of the day, I went with 2 characters that I think would make an incredibly entertaining spectacle of themselves. The first one is Severo from Red Rising because he is unhinged and I love that for him. But I think he would throw his entire self into this dance battle and he's incredibly competitive. So that would be great fun. And I would put him up against Jihao from the book Never Die by Rob J. Hayes, which is another one of my favorite series. Jihao is also a character who's a little bit unhinged, and I think that he would have some very interesting twists on just a dance battle in general. I think these 2 together would just be incredibly entertaining, and it would dissolve into chaos so incredibly quickly, and that's honestly what I'm here for. I would enjoy watching that immensely. The next question is Midnight Read. What is a book that I couldn't put down and ended up reading all night? And that is We Are the Dead by Mike Shackle. This is book 1 in the Last War trilogy, which is a grimdark military epic fantasy. It is so pulse-pounding and so gripping, and the whole book takes place over a time period of about 8 days. You will have you on the edge of your seat the entire time. The character work is brilliant. The atmosphere is so gritty and dark and harrowing. It's so good. And I started reading this book at like 9 o'clock at night and I could not stop. I ended up reading it, I think, in a total of 24 hours because I could not put it down. Question number 11 is the after party. Which book left me in such a bad book hangover that I was unable to start a new read immediately after finishing it? The worst book hangover that I can ever remember in my history as a reader happened back when I was in college, and that was Dead House Gates by Steven Erikson, which you guys have heard me talk about ad nauseum on this channel. I love this book. It is one of my favorite fantasy books of all time. I was in such a deep book hangover after this book when I read it like 12 years ago. And I remember, like, I felt so dissociated from reality afterwards because I couldn't get the final scenes of this book out of my head. It radically changed the way that I viewed fantasy as a genre. It radically changed the way that I think about writing and characters and tension and emotional impact. And I don't know that I'll ever have another book that impacts me and leaves me with a book hangover quite as much as this one did. For those of you that don't know, Dead House Gates is book 2 in the Malazan Book of the Fallen by Steven Erikson. All right, guys, last but not least, our final question is titled Late Night Conversations, a book that left me thinking deeply or wanting to discuss it with other people. And this is another book that I read last year that has swiftly risen through the ranks to become one of my favorite fantasy series of all time. And so it's not really a single book, but it's a series. It's fine. It's going to be fine. Long Price Quartet by Daniel Abraham. It's amazing. And the beautiful part about this is if you're looking for something that is incredibly deep, layered, character-driven fantasy, but isn't a 14-book series, this omnibus edition right here holds all 4 of the books in this quartet. And they're about 250 pages each. So if you're looking for that experience without committing to a long series, this book has everything you could possibly want. This book has so many layers to it. The characters, the world, the plot line, the relationships, everything is so incredibly complex and layered, and I absolutely love it for that. This is the proof that I am a character-driven reader, because this book will take you on an intimate character journey, the likes of which you have never been on before, and I guarantee you that. And one of the cool parts about this book beyond that is the fact that this magic system may very well be one of the most unique magic systems I have ever read in fantasy. Well, guys, that is the end of the Nightclub book tag. It was really fun to do a book tag again. It has been a very long time since I did one, and I want to give a big shout out and thank you to my friend Brian over at Belltube for creating this and giving us something fresh and fun to try out here on Booktube. I hope that you guys all enjoyed this video. Please let me know down in the comments below what your answers to these questions would be, because I always love getting new book recommendations from you guys. And yeah, I hope you guys are having a fantastic week. I hope you're reading some 5-star reads, and I'll see you in the next video.